Hey, Jason here. It was my birthday not too long ago, so to celebrate, I got everyone together to break the rules of Magic and play with Ascendancies as our commanders. Also, we paired them with other commanders because why not? First up, we have Seth on Tymna Ascendancy paired with Omnath, Locus of the Royal. This Elementals deck is looking to draw cards, and then use the Evoke mechanic for interaction that also draws more cards. Next up is me on Mardu Ascendancy paired with Tymna the Weaver. I was going to get Rograk in there too, but Moxfield only allows you to have 2 commanders. Fair enough, but that's not going to stop me from bashing face with tokens and drawing cards. Next up is Chandler on Broker's Ascendancy paired with Djeru with Eyes Open. This is a Bant Super Friends deck trying to see if Djeru is even remotely playable. Last up we have Alex on Riveteer's Ascendancy paired with Garna Bloodfist of Keld. This is a Jund Sacrifice deck looking to use the modality of its commander to get damage and draw cards at the right time. Before we jump into the game, give us a like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. We've got our links to our social media, Discord server, Decklists, and Patreon in the description. We are partnered with Dragon Shield, who have graciously given us a new discount code. Click the link below and enter SMOOTH5 at checkout for 5% off. We're also partnered with Inked Gaming. If you'd like to get a supply drop from Inked, click the link and enter our code SmoothBrain at checkout for 10% off. Alright, let's jump into the game.
It would appear that Seth won the dice rolling contest, and he gets to go first, so he'll play a basic forest and suspend search for tomorrow. He'll then pass to Jason, who plays Sapphire Triumph, and then he'll pass to Chandler. Chandler plays Yavimaya as land for turn, and since it makes itself a forest, he'll cast Utopia Sprawl on it, naming Blue. Then he passes to Alex. Alex will shock in Overgrown Tomb, and then cast Ignoble Hierarch. Then he passes to Seth. Seth's Suspend ticks down, and then he'll play an island and pass to Jason, who will play a command tower and then cast Priest of the Forgotten Gods. Spooky. The turn is then passed to Chandler, and he'll start off by shocking in a Hallowed Fountain. Then he'll tap for 3 and cast Party Jace, who is immediately upticked, and everybody will draw a card. The turn is then passed to Alex, and he starts off by shocking in a Stomping Ground. Then he'll tap for 3 and cast Urabrask's Forge. Then he'll move to combat and make his 1/1 with haste. But as a sign of good faith, he decides to not attack, and he'll just pass to Seth. And at the beginning of Seth's turn, his Search for Tomorrow comes off Suspend, and he'll find a mountain with it. Then he'll play a Command Tower as land for turn on his first main. Then he'll tap for 4 and cast Omnath. There's an ETB trigger, and as a sign of good faith back at Alex, he decides to not shoot the Hierarch, and he'll ping Jason for 1. Then the turn is passed to Jason, who starts off with Castle Lochthwain. He'll then drop Tymna, and then he'll move to combat and hit Chandler for 1. Post-combat, he'll get a Tymna trigger, and then he passes to Chandler, who will immediately uptick his Jace to have everyone draw. Then he'll play a Karn's Bastion as land for turn. Then he'll cast a Nature's Lore, and since it'll find him an untapped forest, he'll also go ahead and cast Cultivate to speed up the process. So between these 2 spells, it'll find him a Snow Forest and a Snow Plains to the battlefield, and then he'll put a Snow Island to his hand. And then the turn is passed to Alex, who starts off with a Takenuma as land for turn. Then he'll tap for 4 and cast Garna. After this, he'll move to combat and make a 2/1 hasty guy. And he'll turn it sideways at Chandler. It'll get exalted, so Chandler takes 3 damage. Alex then just moves to his end step and sacrifices the token, which triggers Garna, and each of his opponents take 1 damage. The turn is then passed to Seth, and he'll start off with a basic forest, which triggers Omnath, and Omnath gets a counter. He'll then cast a Garruk's Uprising, which triggers upon ETB, and he'll draw a card. He'll then tap for 2 and cast Reality Shift, targeting Garna. And it resolves, so Garna is exiled, and Alex manifests the top card of his library. Seth will then move to combat, and he swings 4 Trample Commander at the birthday boy. Jason takes it, and then the turn is passed to him. And he'll start off with a basic Plains. And then he'll tap for 4 and cast Sheoldred the Apocalypse. As it turns out, with a Party Jace out, that's pretty good. Jason will then move to combat, and he swings 2 Commander at Seth and 1 at Chandler. They both just take it, and Jason will stay at the same life total due to his 2 Tymna triggers on his next main. Psyche actually gains 4 because of Sheoldred. He'll then pass the turn and discard 2 lands. Now on Chandler's turn, he'll stay on upkeep and tap for 3 to cast Stroke of Midnight on Sheoldred.
It's a damn shame that Sheoldred Idaligma.
So yeah, Sheoldred is destroyed, and Jason gets a 1/1 token. Chandler will then continue on with his turn, and he'll play a Snow Island as land for turn. He'll then cast Archon of Absolution, and then he'll uptick Party Jace, and pass the turn to Alex. Alex starts off with a Fabled Passage, which he immediately cracks for a Snow Mountain. Then he'll cast an Elves of Deep Shadow, then a Llanowar Elves, then an Elvish Mystic, and then a Priest of Forgotten Gods. He'll then move to combat, and Urabrask's Forge makes him a 3/1, and he'll turn it sideways at Seth, who can't block, and Exalted makes it 4 damage. The turn is then passed to Seth, and he starts off with Castle Garenbrig, which triggers Omnath, getting him another counter. He'll then tap for 3 and cast the best elemental ever printed, Risen Reef. ETB trigger, and the top card is non-land, so it goes to his hand. Then cast a Flamekin Harbinger, and there's 2 ETB triggers. He'll resolve Risen Reefs first, and it's non-land. And then he'll tutor the Maelstrom Wanderer to the top of his library. Seth then moves to combat, and he swings Omnath at Jason again, dealing another 5 commander. And then he'll pass the turn to Jason, who starts off with a basic swamp into Monastery Mentor. He'll then cast a Boros Signet, which triggers the Mentor. And then he'll move to combat and swing Tymna at Seth. Seth sees that there's 2 active Priest of the Forgotten Gods out, so he'll just take the 2 lifelink, and then Jason gets a draw trigger on post-combat main phase. The turn is then passed to Chandler, and he'll start off by minusing Jace to have only himself draw a card. He'll then play Field of the Dead as land for turn, and this makes him a 2/2 zombie. He'll then cast Oath of Teferi, and when it ETBs, he'll exile his Snow Plains, and it'll come back on next end step, which will make him another zombie. But before that, he can now activate Jace again, and he'll uptick him so everyone draws a card. Then he'll pass the turn to Alex, and he'll start his turn off with a Snow Swamp. Then he'll move to combat and make a 4/1 Phyrexian off Urbrask's Forge. He'll then move to combat and swing it at Jace, and he does pay the Archon tax, and Exalted will make this 5 damage at Jace. Alex will then tap all of his dorks to cast a Ruthless Technomancer. When it ETBs, he'll sacrifice his Phyrexian and make 5 treasures, and he does take 1 damage off of his Elves of Deep Shadow. After this, he'll cast Deadly Dispute, sacrificing one of his treasures to draw 2 and make a treasure. We'll then see Dictative Erebos hit the field. And when it resolves, he'll then activate Priest of Forgotten Gods to sacrifice 2 creatures. This will make his opponents lose 2 life, sacrifice a total of 3 creatures, and then he draws a card and adds 2 black mana. And with that mana, he'll cast Altar of Dementia, which he'll immediately use to sacrifice his Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves to have Jason sacrifice his last 2 creatures, and he has Seth mill a card and Chandler mill a card. And then the turn is passed to Seth. He starts off by casting a Farseek, and this will find him his Ketria Triumph to the battlefield. Then he'll play a tapped Steam Vents, and then he'll cast his Temur Ascendancy. Then he passes to Jason, and Jason says no, you may not have Dictative Erebos and a sack outlet, so he'll Anguished Unmaking the Dictate. After that resolves, Jason will play a tapped Godless Shrine as land for turn, and then cast Lauren of the Third Path. Upon ETB, he'll blow up Oath of Teferi, and then the turn is passed to Chandler. And he'll start off by upticking Jason, everybody draws a card. Then he'll tap for 5 and cast Djeru, with eyes wide open, and this will tutor an Ugin the Spirit Dragon to his hand. After this, he'll cast an Oath of Gideon, which gets him 2 1/1 core allies. Then he'll play a Scattered Groves as land for turn, which gets him a 2/2 zombie. And then the turn is passed to Alex. And he'll start off with Command Tower's land for turn. Then he'll tap for 4 and cast Kardur, Doom Scourge. When it ETBs, it essentially goads all of his opponent's creatures until the start of his next turn. He'll then tap for 3 and cast Riveteer's Ascendancy. After this, he moves to combat, and Urbrask's Forge makes a 5/1. He'll then immediately turn it sideways at Chandler, and it gains Exalted, and it does have Trample, so Chandler just takes the full 6. Post-combat, Alex will sacrifice the token to his Altar of Dementia and make Seth mill 6 cards.
Mountain Foundation Breaker, Seagate Restoration, Phylath World Sculptor, and Smoke Braider.
And then Alex will pass the turn to Seth. And Seth will start off with the Reliquary Tower as land for turn. Then he'll immediately slam the Maelstrom Wanderer, double Cascade. The first one hits an Ingot Chewer, which has an ETB trigger. That ETB trigger will blow up Altar of Dementia. And then the second Cascade hits Endurance. When it ETBs, he'll have Alex shuffle his graveyard onto the bottom of his library. Then the Maelstrom Wanderer will resolve, and he'll draw 2 cards off of his enchantments. Seth then moves to combat, and he full swings at Chandler. And because of that pesky trample, Chandler decides not to chump block, and he'll take the full 13 damage. He'll then pass the turn to Jason, who will start his turn off by activating Lauren to have he and Alex draw a card. He'll then cast Impact Tremors, and then Mondrak Glory Dominus. Then he'll pass the turn to Chandler. Chandler starts by -1ing Jace, targeting himself, and he's kind of pushed into a corner now at only 10 life, so he'll tap for 8 and cast Ugin the Spirit Dragon, who enters with an additional loyalty counter. Chandler will then move to combat and full swing at Seth for a total of 8 damage. Then post-combat, Chandler will -4 Ugin to exile all non-land permanents with a color CMC 4 or less. This exiles most of the board, so after this, he'll play an island as land for turn, which gets him a 2/2 zombie. Then he'll pass the turn to Alex, and he starts off with a Cinderglade. Then he'll cast a Solemn Simulacrum, which finds him a Snow Forest. Then he'll cast Judith the Scourge Diva, and then he'll pass the turn. Seth will start his turn off by casting Balagad Recovery to get Risen Reef back to his hand. Then he'll cast the Risen Reef, and the ETB trigger reveals an Exotic Orchard which goes to the battlefield. He'll then cast a Lotus Cobra, and then play an Island as land for turn. He gets a trigger, and it floats a red, then he'll tap for an additional 2, and evoke Spite Bellows. Risen Reef will reveal a Path of Ancestry which goes to the battlefield and triggers Lotus Cobra. The mana doesn't matter, he doesn't use it. Then the Spite Bellows will die, and its 6 damage is pointed at Djeru. Seth will then move to combat, and he swings everything but Risen Reef at Ugin. Chandler will put the 2/2 zombie in front of the Lotus Cobra to kill it, but Ugin is still dead. Seth will then pass the turn, and Jason will immediately tap for 7 and cast Agadeem's Awakening X's4. And this will get Sheoldred, Monastery Mentor, and Priest of Forgotten Gods back to the battlefield. The turn is then passed to Chandler, and he'll play a Bountiful Promenade and miss his Field of the Dead trigger. He'll then cast Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, and he'll immediately uptick him to scry 1 to the bottom and draw a card, losing another 2 life to Sheoldred this turn. Then after this, he'll cast Spark Double, copying Jace, and he'll downtick this Jace to bounce Sheoldred back to Jason's hand. Then the turn is passed to Alex. And Alex starts off with a Marsh Flats, which he'll immediately fetch with for attacked Blood Crypt. Then he'll tap for 6 and recast Garna. After this, he'll move to combat and hit Chandler for 5, and then he passes the turn to Seth. Seth will start off by recasting Omnath, and he's got 4 damage he can send somewhere. There's also a Risen Reef trigger, but Seth will point the 4 damage at Garna first, and that'll kill her. Poor Garna. This will trigger Judith, which will target Risen Reef and kill it. Then the Risen Reef's trigger will resolve, and it's non-land, so it goes to Seth's hand. Seth will then play a Forest as land for turn, and this triggers Omnath, putting a 1/1 counter on the Omnath, and he now gets to draw cards off this trigger too. Seth will then tap for 4 and cast Timeless Witness, getting Risen Reef back to his hand, and then he'll cast the Risen Reef again. Path of Ancestry will scry 1 to the top, then Risen Reef will ETB, and it reveals a mountain which goes to the battlefield, which triggers Omnath, which will draw him a card and put a counter on the Risen Reef. Seth will then move to combat, and he'll start off by turning Timeless Witness towards Chandler. Then he'll swing Maelstrom Wanderer at Jason, and then the remaining 9 damage at Alex. There are no blocks around the table, which means Chandler is dead. And then Seth will pass the turn. Now on Jason's turn, he'll start off by casting Mardu Ascendancy, which triggers his Monastery Mentor. Then he'll cast Loyal Apprentice, then Chivalric Alliance, which triggers his Mentor again, and then he'll move to combat, and his Mardu Ascendancy does count as his commander in this situation, so he gets a 1/1 Thopter from his Apprentice. He'll then swing for 7 at Seth, and this will make 2 1/1 Goblins, also attacking Seth, so he'll take a total of 9 damage. Chivalric Alliance would have also triggered, so Jason gets a card, and then he'll pass the turn, and on cleanup he'll discard Mentor of the Meek. Now on Alex's turn, he'll start off by casting a Soul Ring. Then he'll move to combat and hit Seth for 5, and then he'll pass to Seth. And Seth starts off by casting Warstorm Surge. Then he'll float 6 mana that can only be used to cast creatures by activating Castle Garenbrig, and he'll spend 5 of it to evoke Walker of the Grove. Triggers. Risen Reef reveals Sheltered Thicket, so it goes to the battlefield, and Omnath triggers, which will put a counter on himself, draw Seth a card, and then Jason gets domed in the face for 7. After this, the Evoke trigger will resolve, and there's a Leave the Battlefield trigger, and Jason decides to respond to it by activating his Priest of Forgotten Gods to sacrifice 2 of his goblins. This will get Jason 2 life, a card, and 2 black mana, and then he only targets Seth with the ability, making him lose 2 life, and he'll sacrifice Timeless Witness. Then Seth will get his 4/4 Elemental token. Surge hits Jason for 4, and then Risen Reef triggers, putting a forest onto the battlefield, and then Omnath triggers again, putting another counter on himself and drawing a card. After this, Seth still has 1 green mana floating, so he'll tap for his last 3 and cast Subtlety. Triggers. Subtlety's trigger doesn't matter, there's no spells on the stack. Warstorm Surge will kill 1 of Jason's tokens, and then Risen Reef will put a card to Seth's hand. Seth then attempts to move to combat, but Jason stops on main phase and uses the 2 black mana that he has floating to discard a card and make a 2/2 Knight from Chivalric Alliance. After this, Seth will move back to combat, and he will turn everything sideways at Jason. After blocks, Jason is still taking exactly 12 damage. This will kill Jason, and then the turn is passed to Alex. Alex will start by moving to combat, and he'll turn Judith and Solemn Simulacrum sideways at Seth for 5 damage, putting him to 1. He then shows Seth the Goblin Bombardment in his hand, which is more than enough to kill him, so Seth will pack it up, making Alex, Garna, and Riveteer's Ascendancy today's winner. Congratulations. Well, there we have it. What a fun game. Alex was able to sneak in a cool win in the end. I really enjoyed it because everybody got to do some cool things. Seth got to do a lot of cool elemental stuff. Jason made a ton of tokens, Chandler got killed for revealing Ugin, and Alex got to sneak in the win at the end. Let us know what you guys thought down in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And what did you think of us rule zeroing in the Ascendancies as our commander partners? Should we do something like this in the future? Let us know. Anyways, while you're down there, check out all the links. We've got a ton of them. And that's all for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Have a smooth day.